Hi. Mike Anderson just texted and said he's going to be 10 minutes late. If anybody's listening.
We all are.
Huge crowd tonight. Huge
Yeah.
crowd.
Sorry, it took me a little bit to sign in. I realized when I was signing in, I was still under Juliet's sign in from my EDC meeting. So her picture was coming up. I'm like, I better change this quick.
I do that with so for the emergency services committee, we are using in one of the Board of Selectmen's accounts that I guess was the old Board of Ed account, but they have their own board now. So sometimes I join meetings and I show up as the Board of Ed. And
Oh, I've seen that before. I'm like, how are you in as Board of Ed? That's good.
delete, change name.
That's right. You could sign in, make all these new policies. Just don't have your picture up. They'll be like, what did the Board of Ed just do?
I'm sure Christine would love that.
All right, now we'll get started. We have enough for a quorum. This is Dan Spring, Chair of the Board of Finance for the great town of North Stonington, calling the meeting of the Board of Finance to order, dated September 15th, 2021, and the time being 7:06. Present is myself, Dan Spring, Ann Aiken, Paul Simon, Sarah Nelson, and Brett Mastriani. Dan Smith is absent, as well as Mike Anderson. So at this time, we're open for any public comment, if there should be any. There's no public physically present at the meeting, but maybe there's somebody on Zoom. All right, hearing no public comments, we'll move to correspondence. I have had no written correspondence to this point. I've had unofficial conversations with Mike Ergo, Peter Nero, and Deb Martin, mostly relative to the audit coming forth. So we'll talk about that more later on in the agenda. So we're on to agenda item number 4, which is for Board of Selectmen, talking about, among other things, perhaps the Relief Act funds. Are you taking a lead on that, or was Bob? No. Okay. We do have 2 select people on board, Nita Kincaid and Bob Carlson. All right, so we're going to turn this part of the agenda over to Christine.
So First Selectman Ergo was unable to attend the meeting tonight, so he asked me to do a brief presentation. I will speak to the first item for the rescue plan funds, and then Brett, as chair of the EDC, will talk about the business development portion. So the first item that we're discussing is technology for hybrid virtual meetings in the amount not to exceed $7,500. Because we have had to switch our format of meetings so that we can accommodate more people with the pandemic and have people attend from what they feel is as a safe location. We have had to upgrade our technology for both video and audio capabilities. And then we have a monthly subscription fee for our Zoom accounts. We do manage 3 different Zoom accounts because we have meetings that happen at the same time. And you can only have 1 meeting at a time on an account, obviously. We also pay an additional amount of money for our webinar functionality, which we use whenever we have a town meeting. So the cost for Zoom for a year is $2,220. We have also spent the money to purchase the new speakers, the handheld microphones and stands, the wireless microphones, various cables and cable snakes, and a mixer and interface for the camera. So to date, including the yearly fee for Zoom, we will spend $5,662.72. But we wanted to leave a little bit of room in case there was new technology that we discovered we need for streaming of meetings or recording or anything that comes up for the hybrid and virtual meetings that we are trying to have so that we can continue to keep the community engaged. So this request is not to exceed $7,500 in the current fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. We would then, as we go through the budget and also get farther into the year and see how things are going, evaluate if we would continue to have the Zoom subscription for the next fiscal year. If so, we could again request for it to come out of the rescue plan funds, or we could budget it into the regular budget. So that's why this has the not to exceed number and the time restriction of the current fiscal year. Do you want to take questions on this or talk about the second plan and then take questions on both at the end?
Why don't we do one at a time?
Okay. So do any board members have questions on the technology piece?
All right, I'm not hearing. Oh, Sarah, you're recognized.
Yeah, Christine, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right materials that you sent about the technology. So that's the email that you sent with the attached appropriation request, and then you outline below
the
that, outline the not to exceed 7,500, that one.
So they're two separate files. The second file on that is for the additional appropriation, which is later on the agenda. The memo for the rescue plans is the technology and the business development new hire incentive program.
Okay. So we're just, what's the total amount of the technology?
Not to exceed 7,500.
Oh, that's it. Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other discussion or questions relative to that request? I would make a motion that we approve the request from the rescue plan funds of $7,500 for our technology upgrades as presented. Do I have a second?
I would second that. Yeah.
Okay, we got Ann first. Is there any other discussion? Right, so if we can take this to a vote. All in favor, if you can indicate either yay or hand up, whatever it's going to be, and we'll capture everybody. Okay, for the yays, we've got 2. Sarah, are you?
I wasn't sure if
Sorry.
I was actually seated. So if I'm seated, I'm for it then.
We can seat you, yeah. Brett came on late, and I already had you in there, so, and Ann? Okay, so we actually have 5-0-0 there. Thank you, Sarah. Didn't mean to confuse you. All right, next.
Okay, so Brett, if you can go ahead and speak to the business development new hire incentive program, please.
Yeah, Economic Development Commission voted, and we're working with Sector to have we're calling it North Stonington Works program, where we are working with the businesses in town to help recruit employees. That was one thing that came out at a roundtable discussion that, well, I mean, you can see it everywhere, that businesses all over the place are having a hard time finding qualified employees. So we've been working with Sector, coming up with a plan where we will be giving hopefully $500 employee bonus for a new hire for a North Stonington business after 8 weeks of employment. So there are a few details that we are still working on that we hope as a committee to approve all of that on our next Tuesday meeting and roll it out. Sector will be overseeing the applications and the process of it. And they will also help market the program. So we are asking for 1%, which is about $15,000 to do this program. It's for for-profit businesses in North Stonington, whether they're home-based businesses, brick and mortar. It's open for all those, as long as they have employees. So in the process, we're looking at how many employees do they have today and how many are they looking to have after this process, as part of that application process. And then, like I said, after 8 weeks is when the money will be dispersed to the business. Most likely, I talked to Christine today, most likely that's how it would work. She's going to work on some of the final details of looking at that. Just looking, there are a few other things that we have to decide on Tuesday's meeting, but we wanted to get this through the selectmen and through Board of Finance to have that program and that money allocated, so then we can roll with it right after that next meeting. The only thing that we haven't really voted on are specifics of, do we want to have a part-time incentive? So a lot of the businesses that were impacted were restaurants and landscaping services, things like that. So talking with sector, we feel that it's probably beneficial to have the 500 for full-time and then have a smaller amount in sector is working on those numbers to see how that would work, but we're probably in the 250 range for someone that's part-time with a certain amount of hours to help recruit for that. The reason that we'd like to get this out rolling now is these are businesses that are struggling to hire now. And if we keep pushing it out and pushing it out, it's just delaying everything. There is a bigger program that we are working on for grant and operation assistance. So that's something that'll be coming down the pike, but this one is strictly for businesses to hire in town. Like I said, the way the timing works and the way dealing with sector in discussions, it's very beneficial to start rolling it out now to recruit those employees, because with holidays coming up, seasonal employment, and also with the 8-week program, the bonuses would hit right near the holiday season. So this is as an extra incentive for people to come out and get employed in North Stonington. We aren't putting in an unemployment factor into it. So it's not like we are trying to get North Stonington people to hire unemployed people. We're looking for them to be able to define the employees that they need. We are putting a max of 3 per business on there. And one of the last things we need to vote on Tuesday is also if we want to put a max of employees that business has. So if you have 200 employees, this program doesn't affect you. That's just an example. We haven't voted on that stipulation yet. And then once that's voted on, we will give that back to the selectmen before we actually roll that program out. That was something that was discussed last night, to be able to move it to you guys and then at least go over those final presentation with them before it actually gets rolled out. Because there were only a few details that need to be voted on, but the framework is there for this program. So I'll open that up to any questions.
Any questions from members? Paul Simon.
Please. Brett, this retention bonus, it's a one-time payment after 8 weeks, nothing else after that.
No, nothing else after that.
And that goes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We will follow up with those businesses with surveys to see how the program worked in their post-program hires. Maybe it helped them recruit more in the long run, but it's a one-time fee. We originally discussed giving a signing bonus to start and then following up with a percentage later. But after discussion, we feel like it's best to do the 8 weeks. And that's also what the state did with their unemployment hiring program, where they were trying to get people off unemployment to come back to work. So after 8 weeks is when we did that. Originally, we actually even talked about a 90-day program, but we think that's a little too extreme.
Right. And that would be paid to the employer, and he or she would then pay the colleague.
Yeah, after talking to Christine today, that's how we think would work best. At first, sector thought it'd be best to be able to send those checks directly to the employee, but I don't think as a town we can do that. So the only caveat to that is making sure that employer paid that employee the money. So we will put a stipulation in there that we want a copy of the canceled check, the check, something to that extent, or an affidavit saying that this money was paid out. We probably, to be honest, have an affidavit that the employer signs as saying, if they're applying for this program, that money will be used to pay that employee. If for some reason it didn't get paid out, then we'd want to get it back.
Yeah, no, that sounds right. No,
Yeah,
that's good to me. Thank you.
Brett, relative to the bonus for the recipient, is this something that is going to be taxable to them?
From my conversation with Sector, it would not be as a bonus. And I guess that would be up to the individual business how they handled it after that. But from my conversation with Sector, they did not think it would be.
So just based on what you said, the bonus is being paid to the employer for them to pay to the recipient.
Correct.
Is there a limit to the number of employees per business?
Yes, 3.
Okay. Any other questions?
Right, yeah,
No, Sarah.
just an
Yeah.
observation. So I'm not like, I agree that ideally the funds shouldn't be taxed. I know this isn't our remit, but just an observation. I don't know how giving it to the employer and then having them pay it is feasible for it to be not taxed. Like the employer would technically then have to gross up the amount to cover their taxes, because per the pay, when you process payroll, bonus is taxed. So I think you need to dig in on that a little bit more, like how that would actually work. And
I
just,
agree with you. It would make more sense that they are taxed on it, but for some reason Sector thought as a hiring bonus, they wouldn't. But that would be something for them, Sector and the business, to figure out how they wanted to handle it.
yeah, okay. I had another question. Does it apply to household employees? Just curious if somebody hires a nanny or
No, yeah, it has to be a registered business.
gotcha. Okay.
So it could be a home-based business that's registered, or some of the landscapers in town work out of their home and they have employees. But yeah, you have to be a registered business. And then, yeah, there's a whole caveat of requirements on the other program we're running that requires a lot more information from the business. But this one is pretty strictly your registered business, your employees now, employees after this, and also it's a 8-week. We haven't officially voted on this part yet, but I believe it should be 8 weeks from when we roll this program out. So it's not retroactive to somebody they hired this week or next week.
Yeah. My only personal opinion, just to throw it out there since I can, is you might want to consider either splitting the bonus partially or having a retention bonus later, because 8 weeks is great, but anybody can kind of power through 8 weeks and then be like, I got my $500 and I'm out. So like having something at 6 months or a year would really sort of like, people aren't going to accept the job just to get the bonus. It's just a thought.
Right.
Like,
We did talk about that, but the problem with that is then it's much more, there's a lot more paperwork involved, a lot more follow-up, and a lot more administration.
yeah,
And
more
then we probably
administration.
get into fees from Sector to manage that for
Yeah.
us.
Is Sector the same group that's doing the arts one that we?
No, that's Cultural Coalition.
Okay.
So, this would impact a lot more businesses and people in town.
Oh yeah, I just wasn't sure if it was the same. It sounds like the same sort of setup, like administrative wise. I didn't know if it was the same.
Yeah, no, Sectors are Southeast Regional Economic Development Commission, basically. So we pay them a year, or I think around $2,800 we pay them for the year to be members of that. But they also work on all different kinds of economic development programs with us. They also refer businesses to us that are looking for certain plots of land and commercial units.
Yeah.
But they have a grant program that they deal with grants all the time. They have a lot of small business help. It's like the SBA a little bit on that front, but so they have a lot of these processes in place. So I'm working with a grant person in charge of grants for them.
Okay. All
to
right.
administer it.
Thank you.
No problem.
This particular program is a bit. I got you, Mike Anderson. Mike Anderson joined the meeting at 7:20. There seems to be a little more complexity to, this request. And I think even Brett has said this thing's not yet complete relative to the program. Even though and I've said this in the previous meeting, these funds are intended to be executed as quickly as possible to bring relief. So, I pose that question. Do we have enough here to approve this request? And then,
Dan, on that front, I think this program has a lot more of the structure to it than the Cultural Coalition program that they just asked for the 1%, and they gave you a general broad view of what they could potentially do with it. These are pretty strict guidelines, and it's another elected board that will be just going over the fine, minute details to get this rolling. The reason we brought it out yesterday and tonight was so that we can get this moving, because that's the problem with a lot of the funding that's going on, is it's taking so long to get to the affected people that we miss the boat on helping those people. And the way the selectmen voted on it last night, that they would want to see the plan with the final details before we roll it out, but they'd like to send it to you guys to get a funding approval. So it would go through another check before it actually gets rolled out to the public.
any feedback on that? And
I do have one question. The funds are strictly to be paid out to new hires. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes, it's for recruitment and hiring bonus.
All right, thank you.
And to go on to your point, I'm sorry.
I'll come back to you, Paul, in a minute. Bob? Go ahead.
Sorry, Dan, was that to me?
I think it's on the bottom, isn't it? No, okay. Hang on just a minute, Paul.
Yeah, I couldn't hear anybody speaking.
Hello? Brett, can you hear me?
We can hear you now, Bob.
Yeah.
Am I a ghost? You can't see me though, right? It's just a ghost voice.
Nope.
So since last night's meeting, I have two thoughts. One is, what's the duration of the program? Like, how long will this be open to businesses to apply for? And then second, if there's monies left over after the program's ended, if there is an end to it, what happens to the monies that are left in the program?
So as of right now, it's a rolling program. We did not put an end date on it. But if you or the Board of Finance requested an end date, we can always put that on there. We did not put an end date on it. But with other programs, I've reached out to other municipalities that still have some money in their accounts that they're pushing to a certain date. But all those monies would be returned, obviously, back. I mean, it's held in the town's account anyways. It would be turned back over any unused portion of this.
So if it's a rolling program and you run out of money, would you be thinking, if they have more people asking, that you'd come back to the selectmen and the Board of Finance to add more money to the fund?
Yes, that was part of our discussion, that if we did run out of funds, we would come back. I mean, to be honest, Bob, that would be the best case scenario, that these funds that are meant to help businesses and people affected from the pandemic achieve that hiring goal and get people working in North Stonington. I would love for it to run out of funds, to be honest with you, and to be that effective. That would be a hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think Bob brings up a good point about an end date. In that, as you have said as well, Brett, that these funds have been designated to be executed, and if we have funds that over a period of time have not been executed, I mean, there may be other entities in town that we could develop the use of these funds. And I'm just thinking outside the box. I mean, we talk about the volunteer fire company trying to recruit more volunteers. I mean, a similar program could perhaps be applied to that entity. So it's just a thought. Yeah, Paul, go ahead. Paul Simon, you're recognized.
Yep. Sorry, Bob hit it on the question that I had. I was just curious if there was how long it was to be run for. So just one point of clarity though, Brett, did you say that the Board of Selectmen will vote on this again once you get all the fine details?
They didn't say they'd vote on it again, but they want to look at it before it actually rolls out. So I would think it's a vote to roll it out, but before it gets rolled out, they want to see those few little details that we have to just
Okay.
actually as a board vote on.
No, I think
But
it's reasonable.
Sorry, go ahead, Paul. Sorry.
I think it's reasonable. I think it hits the target audience that we're trying to help there. So the program sounds good, but looking forward to those final details when the Board of Selectmen give the final okay.
With that being said, Paul, are you saying you'd rather get the sign off from the Board of Selectmen before an approval? By
I
the
mean,
board?
it does kind of seem like that's the right order of operation. Does that really slow the machine down all that much, Brett?
It completely slows the machine down.
Can I ask a question, a clarifying question, maybe flip it? So if we approve the funds tonight, assuming we have enough votes, with the exception that the Board of Selectmen has to give final approval on the process, so they can pull the plug if something weird and wacky comes up and sector comes up with a process that we just don't like, it doesn't fit our town, they can still pull the plug. But assuming we trust the Board of Selectmen to like, to like the whatever the arrangement is, then it moves forward without having them back to Board of Finance.
Right, that's how the selectmen positioned it last night, basically that they could pull the money back or the plug on this if they don't like the final details. But like you said, it wouldn't be just the Board of Selectmen that likes the final details. It's also the Economic Development Commission that voted unanimously to push this forward. And Paul, to your question, yeah, it would really slow down the program unless you and the selectmen want to call special meetings just to come back and look at those final details. But really, I gave you pretty much the nuts and bolts of it. Like I said, the only few questions we have are, do we want to have a part-time bonus of the 250, but the dollar amount, the 15,000, the 1% would stay the same. Everything else is just a small little details on how the businesses would report back to us. But that's where sector comes in with following up with everything.
And the vote last night with the Board of Selectmen was unanimous?
I believe it was, yes.
Now, based on that, Dan, I think I'm sold. I mean, I think it's the right program at the right time. So I wouldn't stand in the way of approving this tonight.
All right, will you make the motion?
Yeah, I'd like to make the motion, please, for $15,000 to go to the North Stonington Work Program to be funded from the American Rescue Funds in partnership with Sector.
Second.
Who was the second? Was that you, Mike? Okay.
Yep.
Brett, I'm going to ask you to recuse yourself from the vote.
Okay, I will recuse myself, but I just would like everyone to know that being on a board and commission you shouldn't have to excuse yourself from the vote when it's not personally affecting that person. So it is another commission, but it's not personally affecting me. I wouldn't be applying for any of these grants, just so you know, but I'll abstain.
I appreciate your comment, but just to keep this, I hate to be simplistic, clean. I accept your reclusion from the vote. Any other discussion?
Can we just add a caveat? I don't know if that messes up and you have to re-motion it, Paul, but I love a caveat in there that says pending final approval of the Board of Selectmen.
I would not be against adding that to the motion if that's really what's going to happen. It's going to be a final approval by the Board of Selectmen. That's what the plan is, Brett?
Okay, so you're willing to change your motion, Paul?
I
with
am.
that amendment? And Mike, are you satisfied with that as a second?
Yes.
So just to be clear, the motion is approving the request for 15,000 to the North Stonington Work Program with guidance from sector pending final approval in terms of the program in total by the Board of Selectmen. All right,
That's the one.
discussion now that that's out. Okay, if we can bring it to a vote, all in favor indicate by saying aye or hand. You got one there.
Aye.
Aye.
So we're 5-0-0. One, excuse me.
Can I just make a comment to, since there's two selectmen on the meeting, that it'd be nice if they would schedule a special meeting after our EDC meeting on next Tuesday, so we can roll this out if they approve it, because we were trying to get before the October 1st timeframe to roll this out, and their next meeting isn't until I think that first week of October sometime.
We have a meeting on September 28th.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
All right, if we can stay on this agenda item or number, is there something more, Christine?
Okay, so last night at the selectmen's meeting, they discussed an additional appropriation. So that form was sent out to the Board of Finance today. So it is an appropriation for line B 27.00 LoCIP current from the undesignated fund in the amount of $48,881 for use of fiscal year 2021 state LoCIP grants for road work. So what had happened was last year, because of the timing of the road work and the concurrence of the projects with the steep projects that we have scheduled for the Kingswood, Meadowwood, and Cedar Ridge neighborhoods, we had to postpone the project until we had gotten the final steep approval. So LoCIP is one of the state grants that you are permitted to roll from year to year. So we still have access to those funds. The town has not actually physically received those monies because we haven't expended them. It's a spend and be reimbursed situation. So this additional appropriation request is to allow us to do the projects this year, spend the money this year, request the funds this year. So it will be reimbursed this year. But it just gives us the ability to use last year's money this year to complete last year's projects and this year's projects. And this will need to go to a town meeting because it is over $20,000.
Any questions from the members of the board? Sarah?
Stan, if we're spending last year's money, does that mean we have potential revenue in the 2021, 2022 budget? Since
Yeah.
the grant, okay. So
Yep.
we'll
So
an
you
extra
would-
48,000 that's not accounted for.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Thank
Okay,
you.
so does everybody follow that these were actually monies from last fiscal year? Okay. And that upon completion of the work, we're reimbursed by the state. So it's a pull out of unassigned for now to be reimbursed on the finality of the project. Brett?
Christine, I don't remember, but did we go to a town meeting for these LoCIP funds last year for the same projects?
No. So last year, every year we have to go to a town meeting to approve the LoCIP, the 5-year LoCIP plan.
Right.
Because you have to have an approved 5-year LoCIP plan by your governing body in order to submit to the state with your project plan. So last year, towards the end of the year, we approved last year's 5-year plan. We, at the selectmen last night, they approved the current 5-year LoCIP plan. So as long as this additional appropriation is approved by the Board of Finance at the next town meeting, we will present both the 5-year LoCIP plan and the request for these funds.
I just didn't know if that project was presented last year and then we voted on it and we just got pushed to this year.
It was presented as part of the plan, but no funds were requested for it.
Okay. All right, thanks.
Okay, so I mean, this is something that actually has been happening year after year. So it's not something that is an anomaly or uncommon. And, you know, we're thankful that these assets are available to us from the state. So with that being said.
One more question, Dan?
Oh, I'm sorry. We're at a little bit of a tilt on the screen, so I don't know.
Plus I walked,
Yeah.
plus I walked away, let the dog out, so I'm sorry for that. So, and this, hopefully this question's not been already asked. So it does have to go to a town meeting. So if the town says no, do we owe the state funds? Do we leave a project undone? What's the risk there?
So if the town says no, then this money would continue to sit in our LoCIP bank with the state and would just be unspent. We have 2 roads scheduled for this fall, this month actually, to be done, that were supposed to be done, that are being done in concurrence with the steep project. So we would do those 2 roads, but we wouldn't do what we have planned for this fiscal year, as was discussed last night. And that is Rhonda is the road that is on the plan for this fiscal year.
But nothing undone, nothing mid-project, it just something else.
Nothing mid-project, nothing has been started.
All right, thank you.
Mike, go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
I'm just so I'm not confused, I've been going back to Sarah's point about this being revenue this year. I mean, it's technically it's revenue from the state, but it's not going to help us. It's just going to be reimbursed back to the undesignated fund, correct?
Correct. So if you look at the profit and loss that I sent for last year, it shows 0 revenue in the corresponding revenue line for LoCIP within the A category. So if you approve this and it gets approved in town meeting and we do these projects in the LoCIP revenue line this year, we would get both this year's money and last year's money. So it will be an overage in what we projected for revenue.
Okay. Then that makes sense.
Yeah, and then it offsets the expenditure, Mike. Yep.
But we also didn't have an expenditure last year because we didn't have the LoCIP money then.
Right, and there was no expenditure.
All right, what was the amount again?
$48,881.
48,800 what?
81.
48,881.
Yep.
Brett has a question.
Mike, are you done? Okay.
Yeah, was wait for Brett to do his question. So yeah, that's fine.
I was just wondering, Dan, have you ever seen a LoCIP project not get passed at a town meeting?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it's usually pretty cut and dry. That
Yeah,
we're getting the
I mean-
money, we're just expending it.
Money that is coming fully reimbursed. So, and I think everyone, the townspeople I'm talking about, appreciate that roads are being rehabilitated if necessary. It's to their benefit.
All right.
Right. I'll bring, if there's no other discussion or comments at this point, or Sarah, was your hand up? I'm sorry.
No, no.
All
That's
right.
Sorry.
I saw a flick and I
No,
I can make a motion, Dan.
yeah, go ahead, Mike.
All right, move that we move the town meeting to use $48,881 from the undesignated fund for projects, for road improvement projects to be reimbursed by the LoCIP fund.
I'll second that.
All right, and Brett is the second.
Do we have to list the street names or anything, or is it just,
So this is just a straight appropriation for the funds. The LoSiP 5-year plan is a separate item will be a separate item on the town meeting.
okay, and that's where you have to list the roads or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to put it, it's to the discretion of the highway department, but I mean, they make the assessment of the roads and have a schedule relative to the plans approved in the past.
And the town is restricted to using the funds based on the roads that are a part of the plan.
Right.
So that's why the plan has to go to town meeting. Then before we do any construction, we have to fill out forms, file them with the state. It has to have the approved 5-year plan with it. And then once we get the approval, then we can move forward on the work.
And we're gonna be able to get that done in time before the asphalt plants close?
So this is to do the work in the spring.
Oh, okay,
We want to present everything together with the LoSiP 5-year plan and these funds. So all the ducks are in a row for when the state releases funds in March.
gotcha. I was confused thinking it was with the projects that you said we're starting this month. Okay,
Yes, technically, we're using this year's money for last year's projects. We're going to use last year's monies for this year's projects.
okay.
Perfectly clear.
Yeah, crystal.
All right, is there any other discussion relative to the motion? All right, if we can bring it to a vote. All in favor? Maybe this-
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so it would be 6-0-0. Thank you, everybody. That is done. Did you have anything else on that? Okay. All right. So for the Board of Selectmen, agenda item number 4, we are complete and would move on to reports that were sent to you, which would be Board of Selectmen or General Government Gain Loss, Board of Ed, and a tax report. I also had, and it was an add-on, I wanted all of us to take a look at the undesignated fund and know where we stand there. So if I can have you just review quickly the profit loss general fund, and just go to the back page. And you can see that we had a total give back of $687,447.90. So that's unaudited. Then to kind of get the breakdown, you've got to refer back to page 9 for Board of Ed and take that piece out. You'll see that they had a projected give back of $276,734.27. So the difference between the 687 and that is $410,713.63. And so that's projected, unaudited from general government. So then that's an interesting number relative to the unassigned handout I gave you, where we have the encumbrance of $440,564. So my point here, it's a good position to have developed. Everybody follow the numbers?
It makes it feel kind of like a push, right?
Yeah, it indicates that what we had appropriated to balance the budget actually came back to us in givebacks.
Yep.
It's almost a wash. Any questions there? All right. Again, on Board of Ed, there is projected draft. And I gave you the number of, what was it, 276,734. That would be less than the 2% of expenditure budget, which means by policy, that money can move to the RISA account. So I've asked for an accounting, and when I spoke with Deb Martin, as of last fiscal year, there was no expenditure that they were illustrating out of the RISA account, but had planned on making expenditures in this fiscal year. The policy is fairly clear, but a point of concern I always have is that we'd like to see these dollars utilized as opposed to being building up. So, and again, the assets in that account is under the discretion of Board of Finance, if we should want to call it back. So I've pressed for accounting, and the policy as we presented it did not have a mandate relative to utilization. It was very general, very broad. So I mean, it's something we will just monitor with the thought that it will be used to benefit our school district and not become a behemoth slush fund.
So Dan, I had a question on that. So are you saying that no dollars have been spent since we implemented the RISA account?
That is correct.
Nothing at all. Okay.
No.
And was there an obligation for the Board of Ed to come back and say, not necessarily what they spent it on, but how much they spent? Is that what you were, is that where you were going?
That has been something that has been requested, and I reminded both Peter Nero and Deb Martin in particular that we wanted to see some accounting on expenditures. But we've left it kind of open to their discretion once it's in that account. But I think the intent is that it should be there to be utilized
Sure.
and illustrated, with definition, as opposed to building up year after year.
Did Deb say what was in there right now before this another $250,000?
It was roughly 186,000. Is that correct, Christine? Off the top of my head, Paul, I'm saying 186,000,
Okay. That's
which
good.
would mean it would be combined with this 276,000. So
Impressive total.
she's pulling it up just so that I'm not talking from vague recollection, but I'm pretty sure I'm close. Let's give
Dan,
this a-
might just say something?
Sure.
I mean, from what I recall, the point of the RISA account was to have access to funds to pay for things near the end of the fiscal year, rather than waiting to see, how much money they had left over, if they had any unspent funds. So, I mean, it would be interesting. It would be good to know if there maybe has been expenditures in and out of that, and then replenished once they knew that they were going to have some givebacks. So we know that it's being used as we thought it was going to be used. So, without knowing whether or not, what's come in and out, if anything, then, we probably should know that.
Yep. Christine's coming back on, Mike.
So the total in the Board of Ed non-lapsing account is $133,725.45. The Board of Ed cannot actually utilize any of this money and then have it reimbursed. It's a separate checking account that the town accesses. So basically they would submit to us an invoice to pay, and then the check would be cut from this account. So it's not something that they can, basically no funds have been expended because we haven't cut any checks from it. It's not something that they can use and then reimburse themselves from end of year funds or anything. We'll know when things are being expended from it.
Well, they can put money back into the RISA account up to the amount that they're entitled to, correct?
Yeah, 2% of expenditure budget.
Right, they can keep that, they can keep that in there. So, you know, if there is money at the end of the year, they can put money into the RISA account.
Yes.
But not as basically as a lump sum one-time deposit, if that makes sense. It's not that they would spend some money and then take some money and spend some.
No, I understand, Christine. I mean, I'm just saying, like, you know, say were able to take advantage of buying, you know, pencils in April, that they could, you know, use that money, and then at the end of June, if they have money left over, they could then, as a one-time thing, say, all right, we're putting money back into the RISA account per the policy.
Yeah, whatever their surplus is, regardless of where it comes from, as long as it is below the 2% threshold, would automatically go to the RISA account. And as Christine said, the request has to come through the town and we cut the check. You know, some of what we talked about was with them, and through the policy was specifically helping them with large one-time expenditures, rather than putting that into the budget, that if there should be an amount in the RISA account, that they would have the discretion to make that expenditure from the RISA account.
Which I'm all for.
And that could be expanded. I mean, one of the other things was brought out, and I've seen this in the past, but not in recent times, is special ed. You know, all of a sudden we could have one or two students, and that's all it takes extra that come into the district for special ed. And that line item for Board of Ed jumps in a big way. So it's that kind of thing. Things not planned on, but in general, expenditures that are a one-time. Yep, Brett.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear. So the max they can have in that account is 2% of their budget, whether that's, so we add in that amount from what they didn't spend last year, right? And the max is out at 2% total, and anything over that comes back to the undesignated account to the town.
It becomes cumulative. So that's my point.
I thought, we're sure about that? I was under the impression, and when we talked about it last year, that that was the max it could accumulate to.
No.
Oh, because I think they're under that impression too, from what I understand, listening to their meetings. But I thought when we discussed it, that was the accumulation mark, and anything over that would come back to the general fund. And what that does is also makes
No,
them
I wouldn't
spend
mind
it by a certain time, but it also cuts down on that end of year spend off.
Right. I wouldn't mind seeing that, but that's not how the policy was put forth and approved. And I know for a fact Christine Wagner does understand that, you know, contributions that go into the RISA account are cumulative. And that's why in conversation with her, I've said, no, that those assets are intended to be utilized with illustration as to how they were used to benefit the district. So,
Yeah,
I just throw it out there, you know.
Well, thanks for
One-
clarifying that. That's for sure, because I totally was under that impression, and I thought when we discussed it last year that that was part of our discussion.
No,
Yeah.
no.
yeah, up to 2% of a annually of a $14 million budget can grow to a very large nest egg quite quickly.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had, you know, gone through this process early on in my tenures here with the town, and could not give it support. One, because of that reason, and two, we were still at a point where we had very low reserves in the town. You know, I'm thankful that we are at level on the unassigned that is acceptable by policy. But it's still, we still have to keep an eye on that RISA fund that it can over years become a very large account.
For sure.
And taxpayers, if nothing else, are going to say, what are we doing with that money to benefit, you know, our community, our district? And if it's not, if it's just sitting there and growing and growing and growing, I would hope that Board of Finance would say, look, okay, we're going to pull this back because those assets could be utilized somewhere else to benefit the town. An example would be debt reduction.
Sure. Since we're on this kind of this topic, Dan, I'm not sure if you're willing to listen to something else. Do we have any insight into the American Rescue Fund dollars that Board of Ed is getting, how they're spending that, what those balances are?
Here in the town, is that what you're saying?
No, for the Board of Ed.
Oh, Board of Ed. No. And it's a good point.
Yeah, that's a large number too. So there is a nice windfall for the Board of Ed. It's great for the school system and the kids, but just wondered, is there a check and balance there for how those monies are spent or whether they're being spent?
Yeah, not to my knowledge, you know, and relative to the totality of this discussion,
Yeah.
you know, we want to have accountability. We want to have transparency. We want to know that our taxpayers are aware or can access the information relative to utilization of these funds.
And that was another $500,000. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But that topic, I'm happy to bring forth to Christine Wagner.
Please, yeah, I'd be interested. And it seems like it's something that this body should be aware of at least.
Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions relative to the reports? I didn't talk about the tax reports. I mean, that's something, again, you know, I urge you to keep an eye on. We have to know that we're on track relative to our total revenue, tax collections, so that we can execute the budget that we've brought forward to the town. So thankfully, we're on track, and it's something that is fluid month by month. But my last report, we were above 42.5%. And Christine might have something that's more current, rather than more current even than the reports that I gave you.
So everything that's entered into QuickBooks to date, we are at 53% of collection.
Okay, so that's a good number. And Christine, would you have access to, for last fiscal year, tax collection versus what was anticipated in the budget?
Okay, so the last year we collected 100.3% of what we budgeted. So 100.3% of our projected 98.5% collection rate. So we exceeded the 98.5, but not by that much.
Does
Technical
everybody
terms.
understand what she said? Whether we're-
Yeah.
We hit the 98.5, but by a skosh.
So what's the actual number? Is it like 98.6? Like 103% of 98.5%? Some mental gymnastics there.
I have not done that calculation. and
Okay, it doesn't matter.
I have confidence in myself to do it right now. But we did exceed past property taxes in our budget. We had only budgeted 100,000, which we typically do, and we collected $242,124.38. I think part of that is because we started working with a new collections agency for
Right.
motor vehicle and personal property.
Yeah, at some point, if, and we've done this in the past, not with frequency, but there's no reason not to have the tax collector come forward and, answer questions. Now Donna is new, so I think at this juncture would be unfair to do that, but in the coming months, I could definitely see a benefit to that. Yeah. Any questions there? All right. Unassigned, everybody follows that report. Do know that, again, we talked about it earlier. Some of this is grant money that's been pulled, but will come back on completion to the unassigned. Something that would not fit that bill would be the appropriation, for instance, we did for a radio replacement or a volunteer fire company. All right, so all that being said, if you understand this, we still have a healthy unassigned balance that is within the policy parameters that we've put forth. Okay, so we're off of reports onto agenda item number 6, Board of Finance policies, budget reconciliation. I know that a draft came in this evening from Sarah. Probably not ready for us to review, even though I would like to get this done, but
If it's,
something that- Go
yeah,
ahead.
Dan, if it's okay, I can just, I can walk through the changes. People can think about it, and have a couple weeks to look at it, but I can at least
Sure,
highlight the changes.
that would be welcomed. Yeah.
I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay.
Sarah, can you also send me a copy of it so that I
Oh,
have? it?
yes. Sorry. Christine. Can you let me screen share? Is that okay, Christine?
Yes, let me just, give me a second. Okay, go ahead and try.
Okay. Right, this is the right one. All right, so hold on, I'm gonna jump down here for a second. So because we all need a bit of a refresher, because it was April the last time we talked about this. When we first reviewed it, this is the feedback. Thanks, Anne, for catching these notes in their meeting minutes. So there was
It's frozen on our end.
It's frozen.
Okay, you caught up. Start
Okay.
over, sorry.
All right, you can see the notes section. I'll try to move slowly with the words so we don't. Okay, so these are the notes from our April discussion, the last time we reviewed this. So there was an ask to add a paragraph referencing the state statute that the original policy referenced, and I'll point that out in a minute. There was some discussion about something we didn't end up adding, and I left it out. there was the discussion about the fact that I had started on an appropriations and transfer section that was already covered in an appropriations and transfer policy. So I pulled that reference and deleted some of that. And then they asked to add some clarifying comments about budget control per the CT handbook. So I highlighted everything in blue that I made change to. So just to reorient everybody, because this was April, I did shorten our purpose. So the purpose is basically we're a town that operates under the general statutes. This first sentence is pulled directly from the Connecticut, I should highlight that, from the Connecticut State Board of Finance guidebook. So it's like copy and paste. And then just some obvious things like a balanced budget is necessary for proper financial management. This section didn't change much, so it just talks about the development process. So the Board of Selectmen is responsible for their development. The Board of Ed is responsible for developing their budget. I did expand this step a little bit. The Board of Finance review. This was very short, and having gone through the whole process since April, I sort of expanded it. I'm looking for feedback on it, but really talking about the fact that there was nothing in there that talked about the fact that we make recommendations and suggestions back. There is a statute for the Board of Ed that the Board of Finance actually has to respond within 10 days. So I referenced that. And then I added the specific step that the Board of Finance actually votes to approve to move it forward to town meeting, because there was nothing on that. So that's just a sentence that was added. And then once we get to budget approval, that's where we talk about the actual hearing, et cetera. So that was one change I made, and I can pause if there's any questions about that or any concerns about those ads. Nope, everybody looks happy. Okay, so the next section, this is pulled directly from the state statutes, talks about sort of a reduced version. I tried to get rid of some of the legalese. Talks about holding the public hearing. Now, one of the things that came up in this round was some debate and discussion about when we had to have all of this stuff approved by, and I think Nina a couple times referenced that in the town charters, the town meeting has to be held by a certain date. So I don't know if it's worth calling that out, or whether maybe not referencing the actual date, but just referencing that the town hearing has to be held as per the town charters or something to that effect. That seemed to influence all the dates, going forward in terms of how we did the review. So we can call it out. We don't have to. I just put a placeholder in there to get some feedback.
That might be based on our ordinance, but we don't have we don't have a town charter.
Yeah, right. We're an uncharted town, or I was using the wrong word. Yeah, whatever our.
Yeah, the ordinance is the date of the annual town meeting. It's section 2-1, and it's the annual town meeting shall be held on the first Monday of May each year.
Okay, so maybe rather than calling out the date, I'll just add a sentence to refer to that ordinance.
Yeah, and that way, if for some reason ever that changes in the ordinance,
Yeah,
with that date, then this doesn't need to be updated.
okay, perfect. All right, and then one of the things I realized was missing, and I don't know if this is in a different policy, I don't remember seeing it, was the setting of the tax rate. So all we had previously was that the Board of Finance is responsible for setting the tax rate. There was again discussion this go around. So kind of looking at this in September was a lot different than looking at it in April. We had some discussion around the tax rate and when it had to be set by to ensure that the bills went out on time so that we don't have a cash flow problem. So I proposed a statement there. We could do a time frame or a date, I'm not sure, but I thought it was worth discussing. And then how we calculate the rate, I don't know if that's, I actually have the section about levying the tax from the state statutes, and it doesn't actually logistically tell you how the rate is calculated. So I'm wondering if it's important to document that somehow so that for all future boards, you have a brand new board, people who don't have some of the experience that we've been fortunate enough to have with, Dan's longevity and other folks. Should we document that? So those are my two questions there in the tax rate section.
Sarah, Dan, I think on setting the tax rate, we probably could have a little bit more narrative, a little more definition there. So that not only it benefit new Board of Finance members, but anyone, to include residents, lay people, as to how that happens. So,
Okay, so we agree that we should expand it a little bit, or at least Dan agrees. Does everybody else sort of concur?
and that would be my input.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think you want to avoid the word must
Yeah.
in this. I would say something like the tax rate should be set by mid-June to ensure that the tax bills can be issued in a timely manner. It's a good recommendation. It's a best practice, but it's not a requirement.
I like that.
Agreed.
Perfect. All right. Christine, I'm wondering if I can snag some time with you, maybe offline, just on the appropriate way to lay out how we would actually calculate the tax rate, if that's okay. Okay.
Do that.
All right. And then per our discussion, I am now referencing the transfers and appropriations policy rather than expanding on how transfers and appropriations work. So for budget management, this sentence is new too. I selectively only highlighted some of it. So the original policy said no department or person is authorized to expend funds which have not been approved. There was a good call out in one of the statutes about or enter into contract. So no person should enter into any contract that could potentially exceed the department's budget. And then referencing, the transfers and appropriation section if a board requires additional funding. And then specifically, they asked to reference the statute that says anyone who expends town funds above and beyond which has been approved is personally liable. So those are all the new adds to that section. Any questions on the budget management section? Or call outs? I'm trying to make your job really easy when we come back to this, when it's done. So. All right. That's
Sarah,
it.
one question going, not on that, but on the setting the tax rate
Mhm.
section. I mean, there's been times when, we don't have a budget approved by the town and the Board of Selectmen set the tax rate. Do we need to call that out at all? It's obviously it's temporary until we do get the town to approve the budget.
Yeah, I can add that in. I forgot. That was a good call out. I know we set it as a temporary tax rate. I forgot that it was actually Board of Selectmen that made that call in order to get the tax bills out. So
Right.
I can call that out. Yeah.
Just to let the Board of Finance know that, that could happen.
Yeah. Okay. Good one.
Yeah, good point, Mike. The other thing I might add, and I don't know where it would go here, and I'm open for suggestions, is the auditing process. I mean, just as a note that, our budgets, once fully executed, are subject to audit and reported to the state. And I don't know if that could be just a footnote or whatever, but.
I can add it as a section, and we have an audit policy. So I'm assuming I would refer to the policy as well.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do, as you had done under transfer and appropriations, is just, show that there's some thought and integration, one policy to another, that
Yeah.
they're connected.
Yep. I think it probably makes sense to add it as a small section, and I'll go read the audit policy and sort of you know, like I did with the appropriate, I just pulled like a sentence or two from the appropriation policy
Yeah.
and sort of gave it its own little section. That way anybody who's reading this, because this is budget balance and management. So it's meant to be a little bit more comprehensive. So somebody reading this would want to know where to go
Okay.
find other bits that aren't covered in this policy. So I agree. We can add an audit section.
No, it just, at first glance, first review, I think you've done a admirable job, Sarah. Rather than move to an approval tonight, I think it'll give everybody a chance to print it out, take a look at it in terms of the verbiage, and we'll move to an approval at our next meeting if that is acceptable to everyone.
Well,
Yeah,
that
and
sounds great, Dan.
I'll send an updated draft based on your feedback. So that the version you're looking at has the edits we discussed. And then if there's more edits, just let me know.
Okay, wonderful. Other than those few comments, which I think are good ones, good job, Sarah. Thank you. And we'll look for your amended draft.
Thanks.
All right. Previous minutes, agenda item number 7. And thank you for the submission of those previous minutes. I did. And there are 5 that have been submitted. And the drafts have already been posted. Okay. Some of it goes back to May and early June, which, you know, in terms of recall, what was said, blah, blah, blah. So what I would like to do is, I have personally reviewed them. I didn't see anything of that was material in terms of needing amendment. I would like to make a motion that we approve the previous minutes for the following meeting dates. May 26th, 2021, June 2nd, 2021, June 16th, 2021, July 21st, 2021, and August 18th, 2021. Do I have a second to the motion?
Second that, Dan.
As submitted. Thank you. And yes, I definitely would have as submitted. I heard a second come from, was it?
It was me,
Paul.
Dan, Paul.
All right. Any other discussion relative to this? All right. If we can take it to, I know at one of these meetings I was not there. But if we can bring it to a vote. And this is important. I mentioned this last time we met, is that we're now going to be going into auditing phase, and these minutes have got to be on file. So all in favor, indicate by saying aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, it looks like a 6-0-0. And Ann, again, thank you. Yeoman's work. You must have got sick of looking at
Thank you, Ann.
notes. All right. Yeah, for those who don't know, I will add that Ann informed me last time we met that she is moving out of North Stonington. And sometime near future, she will be resigning from the Board of Finance. And we're going to miss you, Ann. Truly. It's been fun, absolutely.
Still time to change your mind, Dan.
Mm-hmm. She's been a great member. Always informed, always thorough.
For sure.
In other words, spoke about Ann, you know, it was at fault not to mention under correspondence that we had received a resignation from Carolyn Howell. That I know was sent out and I responded. But and if you would, I think it should just be mentioned in correspondence. And I don't recall the date, but the 24th of August. August 24th.
So Dan, have we seated somebody at this point? I'm sorry if I missed the beginning of the meeting or,
No, so I mean, there's probably two ways to proceed here. Is that for Carolyn's seat, the Board of Finance can look at its members, alternates in particular, and vote to move them up to a full seat where that individual would assume the tenure of Carolyn Howell.
Mhm.
The other is to leave it open so that it would be posted as a vacancy for nominees and elections to come up in November.
Should we put this on future strategies then, just so we can,
It-
for the next meeting, or?
It's already up for election. It's already,
I think the vacancies have got to be posted by
So
October 1st.
based on the timing of Carolyn's resignation, it is going to be on the ballot. So if you seated someone to fill the vacancy, it would just be until the election.
Okay, so I stand corrected.
Yeah, it was a close timing thing with September 1st.
Yeah, I was thinking October 1st, but I think Christine is correct.
but to Mike's point, I mean, there is that option to put it on the agenda for your next meeting and potentially move Sarah up to that spot for the next 2 months. So then there isn't that question of who's sitting in and quorums and that kind of thing.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
because I know Sarah is running anyways for a full spot, normal full spot in November, but it would make sense that she would
Sure.
be seated for the next few meetings.
Yeah. And then I failed to put it on this agenda. It really should be an agenda item.
Yeah, that's why I thought maybe on the next agenda, it might only be a month, but it saves a little headache.
Because Caroline she was independent, correct?
Yeah, she was endorsed by the Democrats, so she was on the Democrat ballot for that seat.
Yeah, another point that Christine brought out is, election of seated individuals for the Board of Finance is a special meeting posted with that on the agenda. So, well, I'll take care of that. We'll come up with a date. Yeah, so I mean, it can be in conjunction with the next regular meeting, but would be posted as a separate meeting, even though it might be the same date. Okay. We haven't gotten a firm, do we have something firm now from you? Yeah.
Nothing can happen until you officially
Oh, great.
Sorry, we couldn't hear those comments, Dan.
Yeah, and I didn't have the time, I had kind of a time period, but nothing specific. So Ann was just saying that she closes on her house this Friday. And subsequent to that, she will submit her resignation from the Board of Finance. So that will happen by week's end. So there'll be another vacancy.
Wow, that was a quick sale.
It's been a hot month.
Market.
Tis the season.
All right. So again, under future strategies, are there any reports that need to come forward from any Board of Finance member present?
I do have a question or a potential future strategy.
Sure.
After listening to this meeting and the little confusion on, well, it's not the RISA account, whatever the Board of Ed account is. I was a very strong proponent of that back in May of 2020 and even prior, and I thought it's needed, it's beneficial, and those dollars were and are approved for educational purposes. But with this a little confusion I hear tonight, I think it might be something that, especially with the new board coming on, that it's at least looked at to potentially have a maximum percentage or dollar value, just like we did our policy to have a maximum on our non-lapsing account. It might be something to at least look into that portion of it and say, hey, not to exceed a certain percentage of the budget. Because like I said, I was under the impression that it was that 2% a year or 2% of their operating budget, but it wouldn't exceed that. So they couldn't grow it to a 20% savings, because then it does bypass everything Board of Finance is here for to a certain extent that way.
I couldn't agree more with Brett. I think we need to look at that again. I mean, obviously the Board of Education budgets, they could potentially increase, every year. They're, so that 2% number could change, but I always was under the impression it was 2% of whatever the budget was of that year. So let's just look at that again. I agree with Brett that we need to kind of look at that and see if we need to modify that. I think, that's not to say that the Board of Education is obviously they gave give backs this year. So it's not like everything went right into there, but let's take a look at it. So I concur with Brett.
Yeah, their givebacks are going to their non-lapsing this year, right?
What was that, Paul? I'm sorry.
So, yeah, the givebacks are going to the non-lapsing. It's not going into the undesignated.
Right.
Just commenting on what Mike just said. So to be clear, it's not coming back. It's going to the non-lapsing. So you're right. 2% a year. That's great, but maybe there's a ceiling of 5% or something. I don't know what it is, but
And I think that would give a little clarity to the voting public that sometimes votes down the budget saying there's too much money in there if they think that this account can just grow to any dollar of value. I think it's clear, and it makes sure that there's not just I don't love Dan's term of the word slush fund that he used earlier, but you just don't want it to grow so large for something that, and this year being COVID years, the past 2 years, it's probably more reason why they didn't dip into it like they would in other years. But I still think to look into that potential maximum would, if we did it for the town's budget or the non-lapsing, it should be consistent.
Yeah, I agree. And it also protects the Board of Ed from unnecessary scrutiny from phrases like slush fund, right? And I know, Chris, that Board of Ed members have come on with some anxiety about us saying we're going to pull the RISA fund back or things like that. And I think if we have a conversation and we put some appropriate guidelines, it takes some of the pressure off them. I don't want them burning through that money because they think they're going to lose it. I'd like them to be able to pile a little bit up so that they can purchase software or some things that would normally come as a capital expenditure. I'd like them to be able to have that flexibility, but within reason, so the taxpayers trust that we're managing that money appropriately. So I'm totally for that, and I don't know if we wait for the new board or if we draft it up ourselves, but I think it's easy enough to put 4 or 5 bullets together. Better guidelines around that.
I'm going to have Christine weigh in. As we developed that policy, it was compared to others within the state and was vetted by our attorney. But I think you can just tell from my own comments that, is there enough in the policy? And the other is that if we have the discretion to pull it back, there should be enough in the policy that would justify us doing such as opposed to it potentially being contested.
So the creation of this account is tied to state statute, section 10-248A, unexpended education funds account. And that dictates the not to exceed 2% of the total budgeted appropriation for education in such prior fiscal year. So I think we do definitely need to consult with legal counsel before we start making any changes to the policy. It did go through town legal counsel and Board of Ed legal counsel before it was signed off on both sides. So,
Can you give that the statute again? And
yep, it's 10-248A. Unexpended education funds account.
You know, Christine, if it talks about a maximum account balance year after year after year?
It does not, and that's why I caution moving anywhere on that.
Yeah, I don't think it's inappropriate. I just wonder if they had any kind of guidance there.
It's an interesting comment, though. If Board of Finance does have it's within our power to pull it back if warranted, then a policy on our side where we gave ourselves guidance on when and why we would do that, or whether there could be a ceiling, I would think. Like it's an interesting, I mean, obviously it's for the lawyers to discuss, but it would seem like it would be reasonable.
Right.
Like you know, you have the power to pull it back, so why wouldn't you have the power to sort of guide
I
that?
think
That sounds like a reasonable person talking.
so that policy says
Attorney
1%.
Attorney Anderson, could you weigh in on that, please?
I thought it was fantastic. I mean, with Christine just said what she just said, it sounded to me like, this account is not supposed to exceed 2% of the last year's fiscal budget.
the deposited amount cannot,
It's 1%.
no, it's,
So the deposited amount?
Yes.
it changed in 2020 to 2%. It's in the.
Oh, okay.
On my computer.
So I see where you're going, Mike. So
To
Is
me,
2% really-
the deposited amount could be like, what's deposited in the account?
that's right.
2%. It's not supposed to exceed the 2% of last year's
How do you interpret?
expenditures.
Yeah, and honestly, that's how I interpreted it. That it won't. I thought the account doesn't
One
exceed.
phrase
2%.
of the statute. If you'd like me to read the whole thing, I will. So for the fiscal year ending June 30, 2020, and each fiscal year thereafter, notwithstanding any provision of the general statutes or any special act, municipal charter, home rule ordinance, or other ordinance, the Board of Finance in each town having a Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen in each town having no Board of Finance, or the authority making appropriations for the school district in each town may deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpended funds from the prior fiscal year from the budgeted appropriation for the education for the town, provided one, such deposited amount does not exceed 2% of the total budgeted appropriation for education for such prior fiscal year. 2, each expenditure from such account shall be made only for educational purposes. And 3, each such expenditure shall be authorized by the local Board of Education for such town.
Right.
So they are stipulating it is just on that year's amount that's being deposited. They are not going into a not to exceed for the whole threshold.
Can
of
you-
the-
Christine, do the right after, like.
I heard it too.
We can deposit,
Yeah.
it's either the Board of the Board of Finance or the Board of Selectmen
May deposit. Yeah.
may deposit 2%, right? Can you read that language, please? It's kind of in the middle.
Yep. Okay, so the Board of Finance in each town having Board of Finance may deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpended funds from the prior fiscal year from the budgeted appropriation for education for the town, provided such deposited amount does not exceed 2% of the total budgeted.
Okay, I got, that's enough. So, thank you. That's, so each year we can decide whether or not we're gonna allow 2% to go into the Board of Education RISA account.
Correct.
Right.
So our policy needs to reflect that. So it's not that we want to take money back. It's just, once it's in there, because we don't want to do that. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make sure that there's money in that up to 2%. And it could go up further if we have these banner years or whatever. But each year we should be deciding whether or not to put the 2% in. Or any amount thereof.
Right. And there's nothing here that says that the Board of Finance can't have a policy on the max that we are willing to put in.
I think early on in that language, it actually said, it gave us some wiggle room with our town municipal government and how we're structured. There
Yeah, we
be-
could make an ordinance not allowing this or allowing it or allowing
Yeah.
a percentage. But I think Mike pointing out that part that we may do it up to 2% each year. I think there's nothing that says we wouldn't be able to put a policy in place like we did for our own group to say, if it exceeds certain amount, we
This-
don't or something.
That's reasonable stuff. And the taxpayers, I think, would,
I'm
Even
not
if you
saying
did what,
we can't. I'm saying we should talk to legal counsel before we do. That's my guidance.
I don't disagree with that, Christine.
Nope.
I don't disagree with that.
will they come to our board, Christine?
I think it's a discussion that Dan needs to have as chair with Christine Wagner as chair of Board of Ed. Because both attorneys are going to need to review it again if we're looking to make changes.
I think we, yeah, okay,
Who owns-
great.
Who owns the current policy? Is it a Board of Finance? What policy is the RISA under?
It's an MOA on the non-lapsing account.
Could we get a copy of that? Or is it somewhere I can go find it? on the-
No, we can send it
I'll
out.
re-email it
Yeah.
tomorrow. It had gone out to the boards when it was approved initially.
I think
But
that was prior to me.
yeah, it was a little bit before you, I think.
A little bit.
I will put it on the agenda and I will talk to Christine Wagner. And it may be that we have to talk to legal as well.
Yeah, because
I think there's some holes in the policy that I just want to be sure that if we have the authority to pull it back, that, there's enough in the policy to say we have that right without it being contested. And
Right.
that, again, utilization, it's much like the rescue funds, we're talking about. They're intended to be there for utilization, not to be cumulative.
yeah, and I think, Dan, your point that if I remember correctly, this was to establish that account. And it was the basics of that account. There was no stipulations of anything outside of the law, I guess, on it. But I don't think it would,
Well,
I don't even think we'd have to change that policy you already voted on, the establishment of that account. I don't think that would have to even change.
no,
would
it
just be an internal policy.
It would, because it's the terms in the MOA say that the parties agree that the amount deposited in non-lapsing will not exceed 2% in the total budgeted for the previous year. And it says that it lays out exactly all these things and the monthly reporting structure. So.
Okay, so it doesn't use the word from the statute of May?
It cites the statute specifically and then also says in accordance with the statutes that they agree it will deposit into a non-lapsing account any unexpended funds from the budgeted appropriation from the prior fiscal year. And the parties agree that the amount deposited into the non-lapsing account will not exceed 2% of the total budget appropriation for education for the previous fiscal year.
That happens every year, just like that. So we have to just take a look at, Christine, just send that out. We'll all take a look at it, put it on the agenda for the next meeting and please, and we might have to just adjust our, is it MOI you said?
It's an MOA with the Board of Ed.
And
so
memorandum of
countersigned
agreement? Is
by
that
both
what-
Yeah,
parties.
memorandum of agreement for MOA.
Okay.
Any policy,
Yeah.
you run. it
Yeah, we're
for-
not trying to take anything
Let's
back,
get
we're
the
just trying to
job.
make sure that we have
Yeah.
discretion to
That's all.
to
Yeah.
add each year if.
Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up, but it's things that make me a little, make me itch a little bit. And I don't want to be in a position where anyone from the Board of Finance has to say, yeah, we let the Board of Ed accumulate $500,000 in their ERISA account and it hasn't been used. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to be in that position. So.
Yeah. And we never want to bully them into saying we're taking it back either. That's not fair.
Agreed,
Yeah, we have to-
agreed.
Or
Yeah.
forced to spend it recklessly for fear
Yeah.
of losing it. So there's a lot of
And I-
stuff to consider there.
And I think Sarah's point is perfectly on. You don't want the public to, it gives a little more, less variations of what people think that is for, and that they're just over budgeting to get a budget passed and then trying to save the money for stuff that we don't know about or the town doesn't know about.
Right, but I think the statute allows you to say you're not getting another 2% this year because we have discretion over that.
All right.
And until you spend down things on things that, are appropriate that you guys decide on, and ultimately, we have a say on that as well. Like, it should be for those one-time expenditures and for the kids and for the district.
Yeah, I think we should just look into it. And that's,
We probably beat it up enough here tonight.
Yeah.
We're all in violent agreement, as they
That's
say.
right. This is crazy.
I will put it on the agenda and we will talk about it further and hopefully have a little more detail relative to what exists currently.
yeah. And as long as they don't think we're trying to take it away or attack and not give them what they should have, that we're just trying to make it more clear, I think they'd probably be on board with it too.
Agreed.
If we set agreed, expectations, then everybody's more comfortable. They don't, if we say we're okay with it going up to X amount, then they know what to expect, and they're not worried about, oh gosh, I got to spend it all. Because what if Board of Finance next year tells me they're going to take it away? Like, we don't want that either.
No, no.
I
Right.
mean, what I had done, I did a little exploration as to, some large districts, that have RISA accounts, that there are sizable amounts of money sitting in these accounts. I'm talking in excess of millions of dollars. And, as a taxpayer and certainly as a member of the Board of Finance, I just want to be sure that, these aren't accounts that just accumulate. So, all right. Enough said. I think we all have a little bit of a concern about it, and we'll bring it to further discussion next meeting. All right. Okay, that brings us to, let's see if we've future strategies, just so you're kind of up to speed on closeout. It's already started with the auditing services. Christine could make comment there. And relative to auditing services, Christine also has put together a prototype for an RFP for auditing services. We talked about that. And then the last, I put policies in again. I had an informal discussion with our first selectman, just talking about the budgets that are approved. Large amounts, go to certain departments that we never get to see how those dollars were used. So my example would be the North Stonington Volunteer Fire Company, the Ambulance Association. They present the budget, we talk about their budget. They talk about their execution of the budget, but we never have a final look at, okay, how are those dollars used? And I kind of think in fairness, we should have that available to us. Now, whether or not it should be separate audits, which is another expense, but I think I'd like to see a year-end P&L from those departments. So that's a thought. That's why I put it there. And I'm open to hear anybody else's thought on that. For instance, the development, you can look at the budget just off the top of my head, about $150,000, $250,000 to ambulance, over 300,000 to state troopers. So those are the big ones. Those are the ones that I'm kind of thinking about.
I think it's good, Dan. We're supposed to be stewards of the town's purse, right? So those are significant amounts of dollars that it's another checks and balances, right? I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for that.
And Paul, heretofore, as long as I've been involved, it's nothing that we've called on before.
Right.
Just thinking, probably should.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Does the Board of Selectmen receive that information from them?
Yeah, the answer is not consistently. In other words, it's not mandated. So,
I'm surprised about that. I mean,
your thought again, Mike, was what?
that surprises me. I thought, we're receiving the proposed budgets from all of their departments under their purview. So, aren't they, I mean, is it the annual report? Is that? Are they justifying their budgets in that at least?
I think there's some narrative, but I'm not saying the numbers.
Should that be a Board of Selectmen policy then that changed? Because again, I mean, I don't disagree with Paul that we're the stewards and should see the information, but at the same time.
Yeah, so I kind of liken it to the budget of Board of Ed. Yes, it's much bigger, but we look to see, okay, what's going on month by month, so that we have some oversight as to, okay, their budget is being efficiently executed. So we have these other departments, dollar amount much smaller, but still nothing to sneeze at. It would be nice to know that, okay, how did your budget work out?
Year over year.
Yeah. Bob Carlson's got his hand up. Bob?
So would you treat that different than the library budget, which is $65,000? I mean, would you require them to also, since they're in a separate entity, as is the volunteer fire company and the ambulance, they're not, the Board of Ed is part of the town. It's a department within the town. The fire company's not. It's actually an independent contractor that we give monies to. So it's like the library. So I think if you're going to require them to do it, and they should, but we should require all people that we give monies to get back to us with how the money was spent. Well, the chief got up and stood here and said, when we were talking about the second per diem at the town meeting, that he gave us, one of the people that were here that night questioned, how do we know where the money goes? And he just stood up and said he gives us a breakout to the dollar on every money, all the dollars that was spent that we gave them the year before. So if he's not doing that, he did say if you were there at that meeting, he said he did it. So we should be able to require that, but I think we should also ask it of any entity we give large sums of money to. So
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and very much supportive as to what I presented. I think it's something that we haven't done in the past, but there's no reason not to. So I'll put that on the agenda for next meeting.
That could also influence the budget policy we just looked at, because right now we're only referring to the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen budgets. So if there's additional things we're going to ask for, maybe it doesn't go in this round, but that's probably where it should go, right? Because it's the same thing.
Yeah, again, I think it just, on our part, shows a little more of, okay, we're taking the time to do a drill down, and, okay, we gave the Ambulance Association $250,000. How was it used? And I don't mean to target them, but even in their presentation, I think maybe because of my time, I mean, I was continually asking them questions that no one else have an inkling of, okay, what really is going on? So yeah, it would be nice to know. Go ahead, Brett.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Bob to a certain extent that maybe you look at a certain dollar value or something that you put in there, that if we're giving so much or more that we require that, wouldn't be bad. I do think the ambulance and fire is a little different than the library. I mean, we provide the monies to buy fire trucks for their per diems, for the buildings. So I do think it's a little different, even though they are a separate organization technically. But I do see them a little different than the library. But if that's what we're doing, I think then a dollar value would be the
Yeah, I
maybe
think it's
the
something we can
idea.
develop in our next meeting. I'll put it on as agenda item. But I think I'm hearing in concert that, yeah, maybe this is something that we should be looking at. And if I'm heading off in a direction that no one agrees upon, let me know. But I think this could be worth doing. All right. Was there anything you wanted to add about closeout auditing? Okay. Update.
So the official start date for the audit is September 27th, but it feels as though the audit started on August 1st because we are getting all the documents together from all areas. Again, Susan Pike, who is our accounting generalist, takes the lead on the town side, and then it's mostly the business manager, Deb Martin, on the Board of Ed side. So it's, making sure everything matches from us to them. Also reconciling everything with tax collections, sending sample information over for tests. This is our second year of having the audit completely virtual. So certain things had to be physically mailed. Most things are uploaded to a SharePoint site, for lack of a better terminology. So while I say it officially starts on the 27th, that's really when the auditors take over and the town's just answering questions or responding to anything that they don't have. The heavy lift for the town and the Board of Ed comes leading up until that date. So we are in the thick of it now, and we are into the home stretch. I have not presented the RFP for auditing services to you because we want to hold off to see if the new software is approved at town meeting. If we do have that approval, we will need to work with the auditor who knows our accounts, knows our systems, knows how we function, to help us set up the software. So that would put off seeking new auditing services for another year. But we do need that experience to help us set things up. You are set up for success by the way you set up the background of the software. So if we don't have someone who knows the ins and outs of everything that we do, we may not be set up the best way with Infinite Visions if the town allows us to purchase the software. So
Has that town meeting been scheduled yet? Special meeting?
It has not. We were holding off because we knew we had this LoSiP stuff that was gonna come forward. So I am hopeful that the selectmen may call for the town meeting at their meeting on the 28th, but that is not something that I have confirmed with the selectmen that are in the room or any of the selectmen. That's just my hope. So, but we're looking at an October timeframe.
All right. With that, I would move to agenda item number 9, public comments, if there should be any.
Joe, go ahead and unmute.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes, go ahead.
I got 5 items I want to cover. The first 4 I think are very good. The 5th one, I'm gonna be a little upset about. I thought you had a very good meeting tonight until you got into the risk of policy. The risk of policy, I got a little different interpretation of it than what you have. I believe the board should get a copy of that policy and each member should have a copy of it. I will have a copy of that policy. The rescue fund, I agree. If you've given that money to the Board of Ed, it should be explained what they're using it on also. I asked the Board of Finance, I want you to publish delinquent tax report identifying the taxpayers who go back through year 2000, the only ones I want you to do, whose comments say they refuse to pay taxes. All the way back through that, there is a list of every taxpayer in it, and I have that list, who state they refuse to pay taxes. This is going on for 10 years. I think it's time we did something about that. And I would really appreciate that somehow on your agenda, that we get it done through the tax collector and we publish it. I think we really have to. Sarah, I think your input tonight was very good. I appreciate you looking at the board, the handbook. And I think that thing you read off was very good. Now I'm going to get to the point that you actually got me damn upset about. Oh, the risk of policy. Dan, remember, that was pushed through at an afternoon meeting with the Board of Finance and the Board of Ed when I was very emotional about it. And I told what's her name that she had no business pushing it through because that was been discussed for the whole prior 6 months. So it wasn't anything new that had to be done just at that time. We knew it. And that was done at an afternoon meeting. That's why the board don't know what the heck is going on. Now, I'm not speaking for the fire company. I'm speaking for myself. 53 years active firefighter. Not 1 year can I say that you've ever received a budget request in detail that they give you and justification why the increase for that year was. They've given you everything. Everything is there when they first go out. And I review that before it's even given to you at the company meetings. So you've received all that definition. So if the board members haven't, I don't know why, but every line item has got that budget that they asked for, puts the amount, and if it's an increase, why the increase, and they could know that it's given to you guys. Then I believe that if you're not doing this stuff, I would think that what you just mentioned tonight that you request from them, that you request that from everybody before you give the budget out. I don't think this is coming to me as a shock. I mean, I get upset about this. You going and asking them to give you something now when I say that's the board's responsibility to do before you even give that out, not only to them. And again, I'm not speaking for the fire company. I'm speaking for myself. And please, everything else prior to that was great meeting, and I could hold a discussion with you guys. You did good. That is an insult to me. Now, I'm going to ask you one thing I want you to do. You stated that that company is a private contractor. You show me the contract that you got with them. Show me the contract. Do you have one, Dan? No. Does the Board of Selectmen have one? No. Show me you're dealing with a private contractor, yet every bid that goes out, you have a contract with him, and you know what it is? Show me the contract that you have with the fire department. I'm sorry I ended this on this note, but I just got upset with that, so please, you guys done a good job tonight. Don't take all my comments bad, but that's what I asked for. You made comments, I like to see them, answer. Thank you guys for listening to me. I sat here all night, and I don't know why the hell there ain't too many more people than me and maybe Bob Carlson on the other end here. I don't understand it, but I thank you for letting me speak at the end of the meeting. I'm finished, guys. Thank you.
Joe, thank you for your input, and you're right, we'd love to have more public at our meetings. I think would be very insightful, not only for them, but certainly for us. Again, I will say in front of this board that the town certainly has appreciated your years of service to the town, particularly in the fire department. So thank you, Joe.
Dan, I'm asking you though, I asked you for a couple items there. One was that delinquent tax, which can go back to over year 2000. And the people actually say they refuse to pay taxes. Man, if everybody could say that and get away with it, it would be done. And it's quite a lump sum. It's not one or two. There's more in there, Dan. And again, the contract, show me the contract when you come up with it.
Okay, I've made note on both of those, Joe.
Oh,
Thank you.
okay, Dan, thank you. And right now I'm a little upset, so I don't want to continue because I started out good. You guys were good. And you got a hell of a job ahead of you.
Mike, go ahead.
Just as a citizen and having been on this board with Ann and Carolyn, all the work that they've put in on being on this board, I just think we'd be remiss without saying thank you so much to both of them for all the work that they've done. It's not an easy board to volunteer for, and it's thankless at times. And so I just really appreciate Carolyn's efforts over the years. Even before I got here, she was on for many years before that, and always prepared, always had great input, not afraid to stick up for herself and stick up for what she thought was right, and Ann as well. And I wish Ann all the best. And so as a citizen of North Stonington, thank you guys.
Well said, Mike, and I think everyone here on the board feels the same way. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of hours and sometimes frustrating time and hours, and yet we take on the responsibility. And the least that can be done is show gratitude and thanks for service well done. All right, with that, I would Sarah, I'm sorry. Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to echo what Mike said. And Anna, you're writing down all of the good things that people are saying about you. Really, just coming on the board this year, I learned so much from Ann and from Caroline, and I'm so grateful for having you guys as a resource to talk to. And I feel like I made two good friends. So congratulations, Ann, on your move. And I hope you're going somewhere awesome. And we're, excited for you, a little sad for us, but really grateful for everything you've done. So thank you.
If you hadn't seen that or heard that, Ann acknowledges and thanks you. Correct, Ann? Yeah.
Very nice.
All right. All right. Anyone else with a hand up? No.
Yeah. I'd like to just say thanks to Ann as well for everything. And Carolyn, I reached out to her and thanked her. But Ann, thank you so much. And thank you for your contribution to town. You've been great. And I'm so excited to see Mike take notes at the next meeting. I think that's going to be fun.
I'll resign right now.
That is a
Thank
tough
you,
job,
Ian.
Yeah, that's something that will have to be talked about.
for sure, for sure.
I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
That's you, Ian.
Hmm.
I think Ann presented it. Paula, you got to second it.
Yes, indeed. And we're retiring from one another once again.
All right. And I'm going to take it as unanimous for adjournment. And the time is 9:10. Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Dan.
Night.
Good night, John Boy.
Never
Never gets old.